Welcome back to the Boxing Hour podcast with Lamar West here on All Things Boxing. And tomorrow we have a big fight, a huge fight, a mega fight coming up tomorrow between Shakur Stevenson and Teofimo Lopez. January 31st, live in New York City, right? This is going to be a huge fight, the biggest fight of the year, even though the year just started. The biggest fight of the year so far. This is going to be a major fight. This is going to be a very pinnacle and a significant fight for both of these young fighters' careers. And I'm going to give you the tail of the tape and my fight prediction so far for today. And then tomorrow we'll do the recap. So let me just start with my early prediction. My early prediction, I have it like 55-45, right? I don't have a clear definitive winner, like without a shadow of a doubt. I think this guy will win. But I do have it 55 to Shakur, 45 for T.O., right? So right now, if I had to bet money, I would bet Shakur to win on points. But I truly and genuinely do have a feeling that Teofimo could shock us all and come out on top. Like, I wouldn't be surprised at all. I think T.O. is more than capable. I think if anybody could beat Shakur, it would be somebody like T.O., right? Tank is doing whatever he's doing right now with his legal issues. But in terms of right now, the fighters of today around that same weight class and that generation, I think T.O. is the guy that probably could pull it off and beat Shakur. So I wouldn't be surprised if he wins. So I'm going to give you the tail of the tape in terms of my pros and cons for both fighters. And I'll start with Shakur, man. Undefeated fighter, great. He looked great in his last fight with William Zepeda. That was, to me, his most impressive victory. You know, he has other wins versus guys like Oscar Valdez and Jamel Herring, things like that. Then, to me, he had two kind of duds fights with Josh Padley and I think Artur Tulium. I wasn't impressed with those victories too much, or De Los Santos as well. So it was three fights in a row that he had that kind of just, fell like a dud a little bit. He did what he needed to do to win, but to me, it just wasn't necessarily like top tier pound for pound level performances, right? But with the Zepeda fight, I feel like he really stepped up and he stood in the pocket and he showed that he can fight in the pocket. He can let his hands go. He could take a punch. So I was impressed. I was highly impressed by his performance with Zepeda. And I've always thought that Shakur is the real deal. I've always thought that he has the defense, the boxing IQ, and just the boxing acumen to figure out ways to win. And usually, one thing about Shakur that I like about him that other fighters don't have is that he always does more than enough to win. Like, he doesn't really have any close fights. A lot of guys that get caught up in close fights, or they'll lose some rounds, or they don't do enough to set themselves as the clear winner. But no matter if I think Shakur fights are boring or it looked like a dud, he clearly won. There's never been a fight where I was like, man, I think the other guy won, right? So that is, to me, pound for pound type performances when somebody is doing that on a consistent basis. And I know that he struggled to get certain guys in the ring. Primarily, he always says he wants to fight Tank. I don't really feel like that fight needed to happen already. I think these guys are young. I think that's more of a Super Bowl type fight that probably would be better to happen in your early 30s, like right at age 29, 30, 31, 32, around that time. I think in terms of just stardom and star power. Right, they may not be in their primes at 32, or they could be. You see guys like Crawford or Floyd who they were better as they got older. So I think Shakur and Tank both will get better as they get older, and their profiles, both of them were raised. Right, so I think it would have been premature to fight Tank in the past. But I know that's the primary fight that everybody has been waiting on. He says he won't fight Keyshawn. I never really heard too much about him and Devin Haney fighting. So that's why this T.O. fight is such a big deal. Right, I think that the winner of this fight, it does two different things. I'll say what it does for T.O., but for Shakur, I think that it really establishes him as probably a top 6, top 7 pound for pound fighter, right? I think that a win versus T.O. will really solidify all the stuff that he's been saying about himself, with him being the best fighter in the world, him really being that guy of his generation, and I think that this would really just solidify that Shakur is who people think he is, and that he's who he thinks he is. Right? Because I think that's all he's missing is a win versus a A-level fighter. Valdez or Herring, more like B-level fighters, whatever the case may be, or De Los Santos. But a A-level fighter like T.O., this would really solidify Shakur and put his trajectory as, headed toward top pound-for-pound fighter in the world, with a few more victories. So I really think that this would do great for him. I think The disadvantages that he has in this fight, obviously, is he's not as explosive usually in the ring as Teofimo is. So he usually isn't as explosive. He usually doesn't use a lot of athleticism, just in regards to like quickness or agility or moving his feet or doing different angles that are seemingly creative, stuff like that. I think those are his, and then also he's moving up in weight, but I don't really think that's going to be a big issue for him. But it could because we haven't seen it yet. But I would think those were the main disadvantages I would say Shakur has in this fight, as well as things that Teo does well, such as being creative. You don't really, Teo's unpredictable. So you really don't know what Teo's game plan is going to be. You don't know how he's going to fight. And he's so unpredictable and creative with his styles of boxing and the types of punches he throws and stuff like that, I think that could potentially give Shakur an issue, just because Shakur is such a sniper and so locked in so much that when you have somebody that seemingly is kind of doing stuff, making up stuff on the fly, or being very nimble and creative, maybe that can sometimes throw you off your game if you're used to fighting a certain way all the time, right? And I think that also just, like Teo is athletic. Teo has the quicker hand speed to me. Teo seemingly has a little more pop on his punches. So I would give Teo the agility, the speed, and maybe a little bit more pop than Shakur. So those could be some disadvantages for Shakur. But where I think Shakur makes up for that is his defense. His defense is expert master level defense, even though it's not a defense of a Floyd where he's slipping punches. He's doing a shell on the ropes and guys are sitting, swinging 7-8 punches and just missing. His defense is distance control. You can't even get close enough to me to land a punch. And then when you do, I step out of the way, right? Or I move my feet out the way so you can't even get to me or cut off the distance. So I think that out of all the skill sets between Teo and Shakur, the guy who has the best skill set at one particular thing is Shakur. His skill of defense is much higher than any other skill that Teo has. So I think that is what his biggest advantage is. Usually the guy with the one superpower can usually pull out the fight, right? Like if Steph Curry is playing Kyrie may be able to handle the ball better, may be able to finish better, drive into the lane or do whatever, maybe even better defense. But that one skill that Steph Curry has of shooting is so much greater than anything else that Kyrie can do. It sets him apart, right? And I think that could potentially be this case with Shakur's defense. So I would say Shakur's defense, Shakur's boxing IQ has proven to be just unworldly and great. And also I think that Shakur's biggest advantage here is going to be that he remains disciplined. We don't really ever see him lose composure or lose his self-control or emotion or anything like that in the ring. I think that his composure and his discipline throughout the fight is going to be what helps him get this victory, because we've seen Teo get frustrated versus Sandor Martin or versus Jermaine Ortiz or versus Kambosos, right, when he lost. So we've seen Teo struggle with staying disciplined and focused throughout the entirety of a fight or keeping his emotions together throughout the entirety of a fight. Whereas with Shakur, we see him locked in all the time. Like I said, the only reason I could see the locked in part maybe being an issue is if Teo gets a little too creative or is in the ring swagging it out and it's kind of throwing Shakur off. But I would still give those advantages to Shakur. And that's the reason I'm picking Shakur, is because of his IQ, his defense, and his discipline. But yet and still, I would not be surprised if Teo put it off. And the reason why is because some advantages for Teo. Obviously, like I said, I think that Teo has a quicker hand speed. I think Teo uses more agility. Whoever is really more athletic in real life, I don't know. But Teo uses more agility inside of the ring. So I think that his quickness in terms of his hand speed, his agility, and also his creativity in the ring. Like, you just don't know. He's unpredictable. And you don't know what you're going to get from him at any given round. Like, the way that he fights in the first 3 rounds may be different from how he fights in rounds 7 and 8. And I think that when you're facing somebody like that, that can be a real advantage for that person, right? Because it's hard to really lock in on a strategy or a game plan when you're fighting somebody that will switch it up in the middle of the fight. He may switch up 3 times in one fight, his style of fighting, right? So I think those are some advantages that Teo has, as well as I think that Teo has faced the better opponents. Teo has been in there with Lomachenko. Teo has been in there, who else? With a Richard Comey. Teo has been in there with a Josh Taylor, right? So I think that Teo has been in there with the better of competition, and this moment probably isn't going to be too big for him. So that is an advantage that I would give Teo as well. But in terms of disadvantages, man, like I said, I think that the biggest issue for me with Tio is just his mind, his composure. I feel like I can foresee him getting frustrated at some point throughout this fight. Rather he's getting hit more than he expected, or rather he is not landing the way he wants to. I can see him getting frustrated with not knowing whatever he's trying to do is not working, and he doesn't know what else to do. Or then he gets to the point where he's just trying stuff that's not working, right? So I think that Tio's mind is going to be what handicaps him, because we've seen him we've seen him look good versus a Richard Comey or versus a Lomachenko or Josh Taylor, but then we see him have fights like Kambosos where he actually loses, right? Or then he has a fight like Jermaine Ortiz or Sandor Martin, which I think he lost those fights, right? So I think that his biggest issue is just his mental and his composure and staying consistent, and I think that is what will cost him the fight ultimately. But I really truly and also some other disadvantages is that he hasn't fought anybody professionally with the defense or the boxing IQ as Shakur. And I think that can be a real, like a lot of the guys that Tio has faced, a lot of them guys are come forward type fighters. My apologies. We haven't really seen Tio fight too many guys that are like back foot fighters, right? And I think that will pose a real threat to Tio. And yes, I think that Tio, I think Shakur is like a 55% favorite over 45. But I really wouldn't be surprised if Tio figures out a way to win. It's just hard for me to envision like what Tio is going to do to actually win each round and come out on top. But at the same exact time, I really wouldn't be surprised if Tio won. I feel like I won't really know until the night of the fight when I see the guys walk out to the ring. That's when I feel like I will really know. But I really wouldn't be surprised if Tio won, but I will put my money on Shakur. But, if Tio did win this, then I think that this stamps him as a Hall of Famer, one of the best of his generation. If he can have a resume with Shakur Stevenson, who people are heralding as like a great, almost calling him an all-time great already, one of the best defensive fighters ever, somebody that's been avoided supposedly and all that stuff. So if he can have a win over Shakur, he can, in Shakur's prime, a win over Lomachenko. When he fought Lomachenko was the same. Like nobody wanted to fight him. He was a boogeyman. He was like an all-time great. So to be able to beat Shakur, to be able to beat Lomachenko, to be able to beat Josh Taylor, to be able to beat Richard Comey when he beat Comey, like this was really solidify him as like, oh wow, this guy probably is a Hall of Fame fighter, undoubtedly. And if he was to beat one or two more guys of his generation, now we're looking at an all-time great fighter, right? So I think that is what makes this fight great, is that there's so much at stake. It really propels, and whoever the winner is, it really propels them to another level of greatness, right? And I think that for as far as the fight itself, I don't think it's going to be exciting. I'm going to be honest. I think it's going to be a high IQ boxing match, chess match. I think that Shakur won't throw a lot of punches. He won't engage a lot. I think he's going to just try to do enough to win each round and walk away with the victory. I do think that Tio will try to engage and try to get the fight going, but I don't think that it's going to be an exciting fight, if I'm being honest, because I just can't envision Shakur standing in the pocket exchanging with Tio, right? So that's my opinion on it. But I'll be tuned in and looking forward to the fight just like everybody else. So that's my early prediction, and I'll be back once the fight is over to give you guys my recap of the fight. But again, this Lamar West here at the Boxing Hour. Stay tuned.